Hi, my name is Dr. Wagner. I'm faculty in the Department of Geography and Sustainable Planning here at Grand Valley State University. I thought I'd make a video kind of highlighting the careers that are available in geography. Not just the careers, but also the associated job market and the pays. You know, how much does it pay to have a job in one of these fields? But just to throw that at you probably would not make a great deal of sense without first talking about geography as a discipline. So, I'm trying to wrap this up in as little time as possible while playing the keyboards on this video business. So bear with me. And so let's talk about geography first and say, okay, geography is the why of where. Okay, if you're curious about where things are and how they function, it's the power of place. Each place is unique. Each place has its own inherent uniqueness and significance. So we are studying the power of place by studying space. Well, inherently, that means you cannot just study space. You have to break it up into its subcomponents. And otherwise, it becomes too overwhelming. Plus, there has to be a degree of organization to your line of inquiries, to the thought process. And any one of these circles could be a career. And they are careers for certain people. And so I'm going to be drawing on some of these circles later on to say, okay, by having a background in these areas, these are the possible careers and this is the job growth and these are the pays associated with it. But I can't make it too abstract, okay? So we are dealing with this highly interdisciplinary nature of geography. Now, the top four circles kind of is a subset of geography called physical geography, and it sort of looks at climatology, meteorology. It looks at the atmosphere. If we take 20 plus years of meteorology, then that gives us climatology. So if you look at the map behind me, this is a breakdown of global climates. And those climates have been determined based on temperature ranges and humidity ranges, and in some cases, elevational ranges. Okay, and then we take a 20-year average, and that kind of generates the map. But we can also look at the ingredients, the meteorology, by looking at these images and say, okay, what goes into the local meteorology that explains the outcome after plus or minus 20 years to give us climate. And then, of course, we can start talking climate change, and that's a topic all by itself. We can then look at the geomorphology, and really we're looking at the lithosphere at this point. You can say, well, what's the difference between geology and geomorphology? Well, geographers in Europe kind of are stronger in geomorphology than in the U.S. But geomorphology looks at the Earth's crust and only, the top layer, the shape of the Earth's surface, what explains the shape. And, soils are part of that, soils geography. There's over 10,000 soil series worldwide. We don't look at the petroleum, natural gas deposits, although when that stuff comes to the surface, it has an impact on the economic geography. So then all of a sudden, the geographer could weigh in again. We can look at the biogeography, and if you look at the map behind me, these are the biomes, and we can look at the global distribution of plant life and animal life in response to the climate in response to the geomorphology and come up with the variations in space of the biosphere. Well, then here we have marine science, and now we're looking at, for one thing, the hydrosphere, but the ocean surface is also kind of part of the biosphere because there are living things floating around in the oceans, and they have a unique geography to it. The species in the tropics in the oceans are different from those in the Arctic and Antarctic oceans. Obviously, then there is a geomorphology that gets to the shape of the ocean floors, right? The bathymetry, and then there is the atmosphere, again playing a role into the marine science. So just to give you a sense, this is what the physical geography is all about. And we'll talk about geospatial technologies a little bit later, but the volume of data that is collected in these fields is so massive these days that geospatial technologies is about the only way that we can digest and manage all this information. All right. Let's talk about physical geography on one end and then human geography on the other end. Okay, and we have two circles now, and you can see that the human geography is not a standalone on its own kind of category. It very much intersects with the physical geography. I think at least personally, one of the attractive nature or features of geography is that, you could be a political geographer, or you could be an urban planner or urban geographer, or you could be an economic geographer, but in the back of your mind, there is always a physical geography component to it. It could be just the weather, but it could be a natural resource as defined within the physical geography. So it's always good to be aware of that critical spatial interface. And it could be overwhelming, but since we are very interdisciplinary in nature, we have to be inclusive. Now, we cannot be an expert in all of this. Even with the life expectancy pushing 80 years, there is too much. On the other hand, you have to be sensitive to the realities out there and that these universes sort of do exist. All right. So we can talk about this, and one critical component to be aware of is the function of scale. We can talk about climatology, meteorology at the local level, at the regional level, national level, international level, and we can talk about it globally. But that's also true for biogeography or geomorphology. Okay, same when it comes to historical geography or political geography or geopolitics. So that variation in scale, again, kind of harks at the interdisciplinary nature, but also at the flexibility of geography and kind of at the cartographic backbone of being able to look at space and be inclusive. So let's look at human geography here, and we can look at urban and regional planning, urban studies, and urban geography. If you look at the image behind me, you kind of get a sense of the interface between the physical world and the human/economic, political, cultural world. We'll come back to that later in greater detail. Okay. Likewise, if you look at the next image behind me, there is an image depicting a historical event, and we're using the power of cartography to highlight this particular aspect of U.S. history and how one person perceived it to be. The next image deals with economic geography. What is the reality here? There are hundreds, if not thousands, of images I could have picked for, to depict economic geography. But again, you're looking at a map here of the United States and saying, okay, what is the economic comfort level that exists at one point in time for this area? Of course, this is not a static image at all. It's always highly variable. Moving on to the next level, of the next flavor, if you will, medical geography as part of health sciences. Here I chose to use the John Snow map. John Snow was kind of the father of epidemiology. He was the person to decipher the cholera outbreaks in the UK, in the city of London, by tying cholera cases to public wells in the neighborhood. And if we were to redo that study, then that map would look something like this today. This would be a 21st rendition of a 21st century rendition of that 19th century map. The next two maps sort of showcase an example of cultural geography. In this case, we're looking at the pay associated, the highest pay by state, and it turns out to be highly correlated with sports. Or if we look at the other map, it kind of shows you the cultural preference when it comes to ice hockey by analysis of tweets. And again, this can be mapped. I could have picked linguistic geography. I could have picked denominational religious geography. Again, tons of examples possible, but I have to keep this recording to a little bit of a short amount of time. The next flavor, moving on, deals with population geography, demography. We're looking at an ever-increasing global population. What is the nature of that population? Where are the areas of high growth? Where are the male-female imbalances? Where are we dealing with infanticide? Where are we dealing with an aging population? How do we understand the distribution of population? And of course, the map I showed you is just the global increase of the number of people there. The next flavor deals with behavioral geography. Okay, I said there is a geography component to psychology, and I said yes, there is. We at the Geography and Urban Regional Planning at Grand Valley, we really treasure sustainability? Well, that has a great deal to do with psychology. So if you look at the chart that I put up behind myself here, there is a social, environmental, and economic reality, and they overlap. And where those three intersect in this Venn diagram, or basically we're dealing with sustainability. But again, we can add scale to this. Is this local? Is this regional? Is this at the state level? Is this at the national level? Is this at the international level? On and on. Okay. And then the last one deals with political geography. And, I have a little bit of a bias here. We can take political geography and divide it into geopolitics. And I'm showing you a beginning of the 20th century map dealing with geopolitics, dealing with the Heartland theory. I'm not going to go into that, but it was a prevalent line of thought for a while. But if you look at the next image, you're looking at the Arctic. And the countries that border the Arctic, you say, well, why is that even of concern to political geographers or geopoliticians? Well, if you look at the next map, you can look at the inventoried fossil fuel resources underneath the Arctic, and all of a sudden you can see that there is a potential source of conflict as to who owns and who has access to these deposits. And of course, all of this then goes back to climatology, meteorology, climate change. It becomes political, it becomes economic, it might even become historical. All of that. The next map I decided to throw in there just for giggles deals with electoral geography, kind of a relevant topic when it comes to U.S. elections. We can generate maps at the township level and say, okay, what is the voting behavior in the U.S. when it comes to these every 4-year or 2-year elections, when it comes to presidential or senatorial or midterm elections or local elections. There's just so much there. People that make a career at that all by themselves, just looking at the electoral geography of the United States. And then the last map, just to top things off, deals with kind of the legal geography. Well, is that cultural? Or is that historical? So, well, you can take a political geography perspective and looking at legal systems at the global level, saying, where is there Islamic law? Where is there Roman law? Where is there British common law? And what are the ramifications of those legal constructs worldwide? So we're about 20 minutes into this explanation of geography. Let me throw one more curveball at you. And this curveball deals with urban and regional planning, because at Grand Valley, urban and regional planning is housed in the Department of Geography. And sustainability kind of ties the two together. So what's urban and regional planning? Well, you're trying to structure and optimize the use of space at the urban regional level to protect human health and safety, promote economic efficacy, respect human equity, and encourage long-term sustainability. Okay. So zoning is part of that, but so is architecture. And let me put up another map behind me. So is transportation geography. What are the modes of transportation? How effective are these modes of transportation? Are they cost effective? Are they environmentally friendly? What's the impact of transportation on public health? All these angles. So like geography, comprehensive urban and regional planning is very much multidisciplinary. And it can only be practiced these days with the smart use of computer-assisted geographic techniques, as in Geographic Information Systems, or GIS. And for all of these fields, including urban and regional geography, it's the only way to inventory, catalog, study, analyze, and ultimately make an attempt at optimizing the use of space. So I can then say, okay, and these circles are not necessarily weighted in any way, but I say, okay, starting with the John Snow map of the mid-19th century, which it's the first map of medical geography, epidemiology, but it's also kind of the first map of urban and regional planning in a way, because we're looking to safeguard public health. And then, yes, there is an economic reality to urban and regional planning. I mean, urban systems, majority of the population worldwide now lives in urban environments. What are the economic realities? And of course, there is a demographic dimension to urban and regional planning. If we are planning an urban environment for over 20 million people, and of course we have cities that are that big, what goes into that? But then what's the demographic makeup of those areas? Regulating, controlling, optimizing space becomes political in an awful big hurry. It's a reality. There is not always a consensus as to how to proceed politically with the optimization of space. Then there are the physical geography realities. What is the connection between a green roof or a urban stormwater retention pond and biogeography? So, you're messing with the hydrosphere, you're messing with the biosphere. If it's a tropical environment, the pond's not going to freeze, but if it's in a cold climate, it could freeze. There are historical realities that people might want to cling to, kind of historical preservations. We have neighborhoods in Grand Rapids, like Heritage Hill, that, from a planning perspective, have some historical rules and regulations that people think are worthwhile. And then, of course, we know that climates in urban environments very much also have a urban climatological dimension. When you have enough blacktop and concrete, they tend to retain heat, and therefore, if it's a large area, there are microclimates to be talked about. Okay, so again, we're coming up on 24 minutes already. Just to kind of underpin what goes into geography and urban and regional sustainable planning. I hope by now that the geography class from Miss Smith or Miss Johnson or Mr. Willis during middle school, yes, they were doing the right thing, but there is so much more to it. All right. Okay, so let's stop here and switch to careers in geography. Okay, welcome to part 2. The previous 24 minutes and 34 seconds were used to kind of get a handle on the nature of geography. So let's now deal with the associated careers, job outlooks, and pays. But before we do that, let me promote my study abroad, which in essence, deals with every single aspect that we talked about in the previous 24 minutes. So it is probably the most interdisciplinary study abroad in the Netherlands at Grand Valley State University. It happens every summer, 2 weeks, during the first 2 weeks of summer 2. So typically we leave at the end of June, come back the first week of July. All right, enough about that. So let's talk about geography. And I thought, well, I need to have a good background image here. And I think this one here sort of gives you the global interconnectedness at all these various disciplinary levels. But let's move on and go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and look at a number of careers. Bureau of Labor Statistics is it's a very useful federal website that illustrates what the various job categories are within the U.S. and then also their information about pay and long-term outlook on jobs, etc., etc. Okay, so here we have the jobs associated with cartographers and photogrammetrists. And go, did we talk about that in the previous 24 minutes? Well, yes, we did, because after you have consumed the content from a geographic point of view, it's going to require the manipulation of the data. And we talked about GIS and remote sensing and the geospatial analysts. I think cartographers and photogrammetrists are sort of in that geospatial analyst category. You can click on what they do. Where they work. And notice that the majority of these folks tend to work in local government, along with the private sector, architectural engineering firms. Okay. But I don't want to go through each website. Otherwise, again, this video would become way too long, and I think you can find this information yourself. However, they have these little introductory videos that kind of talk about the career itself and what you might encounter and expect. But look at the pay, look at the forecast. This is all relevant information, and this is a living wage, especially when you add benefits to that. All right, let's look at our video.
Map makers of the past may have labeled unknown territory, "Here be dragons," but today's map makers rely on detailed measurements from satellite imagery to describe even those areas hidden from human eyes. Cartographers and photogrammetrists are the technologically skilled professionals who collect and interpret geographic information to create maps. While they share many characteristics, the two fields differ in the products of their work. Cartographers design accessible maps for general use, while photogrammetrists create specialized maps of Earth's surface features. They obtain geographic data from a variety of sources, including aerial cameras, satellites, and lasers attached to drones, planes, or cars. Some maps require gathering data about a population, including demographics or population density. Maps may sometimes be made for a particular purpose, such as regional or education planning or emergency response. Although cartographers and photogrammetrists spend much of their time in offices, certain jobs require travel to the areas being mapped. Most work in architectural and engineering firms, local government, or technical consulting services. Full-time, normal business hours are typical, though those who do field work may have longer workdays. A bachelor's degree in cartography, geography, geomatics, or surveying is the most common path of entry into this field. Courses in computer programming, engineering, math, and GIS technology are helpful. Some states require cartographers and photogrammetrists to be licensed.
All right, I think that's a very nice summary, very useful. Let's go to another one that I think is related by way of technology, which would be, let me find it now, urban and regional planning. Okay, that we talked about that at the end of the previous section. But, as you can see, given the technology that's used and also the information consumed and analyzed, there is a tremendous overlap. Look at the 10-year outlook. Okay, so this is a growing field with decent pay. You're talking about a master's degree. Yes, that's not a bad idea, but we have dozens of graduates with a degree in geography and planning from Grand Valley that are fully functional without a master's degree. But I would say a master's degree in any field at some point in time probably would always be advantageous. The work environment matches what we saw before: local government, local engineering firms. And of course, in Michigan, local engineering is doing the bulk of urban and regional planning in the state. So again, there is a great deal of overlap there between the photogrammetrist, cartography, and the geospatial analyst and urban and regional planning. And that's why we require, well, not require, but highly suggest that urban and regional planners are fully literate when it comes to geospatial technologies. Okay, let's take a look at the added video clip from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for this job category.
From Manhattan's sky-high grid to the tangled sprawl of Los Angeles, urban and regional planners play a key role in making sure cities become more connected communities rather than concrete jungles. Urban and regional planners develop plans for how land will be used and oversee complex projects that help accommodate population growth while retaining or revitalizing functional communities. The zoning policies they administer have an impact not just on historic buildings, but also on the environment, housing, transportation, and more. Using statistical techniques, field investigations, and technology, urban and regional planners gather and analyze data to understand the current and future needs of their local area. They develop plans to address the needs they uncover, from planning new parks and schools to meet anticipated growth, or sheltering the homeless to making changes that might attract business development. Urban and regional planners present their project proposals to communities, officials, and planning commissions. Their recommendations help guide decision makers to consider all the factors involved in a new project. Most urban and regional planners work for local government. They may work evenings or weekends to attend meetings with neighborhood groups and frequently leave the office to inspect proposed development.
All right. Okay. And again, you can come back to this site and dig into it because you can spend an hour just on these pages here. Just for giggles, this is the Bureau of Labor Statistics' own website. And lo and behold, what have they displayed here? It is a GIS digested page where you can click and search by area and by job on what might be available, and all the information that we've shown so far would come along with that. All right, we spent a fair amount of time talking about the physical geography and, of course, atmospheric sciences. Climatology, meteorology are part of that mix. And here is the outlook for that particular job category. So yeah, the entry level would be a bachelor's degree, but I think I have to be honest here saying that a master's probably on down the road would be required. And you say, okay, where are most of these people working? And it is indeed the federal government, state government. So it is a niche occupation. One of the other concentrations in geography because of its link between the physical and the human side from a spatially managed perspective, is the environmental scientist and specialist. In here too, I think you're looking at the 10-year forecast. It is good. Typical entry degree requirement is a bachelor's degree. And the pay, again, is respectable. Where do they work? And it is a little bit of an even mix here. Local government, depending on the size of the government, of course. State level, but then also in the private sector. But again, geospatial technology is the linking skill set that kind of ties this with urban and regional planning and also with the geospatial analyst position. I wanted to include the surveying and mapping technician. These are entry-level positions. Typically don't even require a 4-year degree, especially local government. But we have had a number of students that were sort of interning or having part-time jobs as surveying and mapping technicians while they were completing their 4-year degree, moving on to the geospatial analyst type of positions. And of course, this is practical training in the field, and there's nothing wrong with that. Let's look at another flavor, which would be the geoscientist. And again, you're looking at the pay, which is probably a whole lot more than most faculty make at Grand Valley State University. Yes, that is the case. Entry level, bachelor's degree. And again, you have a fairly positive job outlook. Where do these people work? Largely in the private sector. And again, this overlaps with what we saw in urban and regional planning and also with the geospatial analyst category. And I kind of want you to see the pattern that's emerging here so you can connect the dots, and that this becomes a labeling game. The work typically has a lot of similarities, but what's the label that you have in the job title? Let's take a look at the video associated with this.
Geoscientists dwell in an unusual frame of reference, studying evidence of events that happened millions of years ago to understand the present and try to foresee future geological events. Geoscientists study the physical aspects of the Earth, such as its composition, structure, and processes, to understand how it was formed and what forces shaped its features. Splitting their time between the lab, the office, and the field, geoscientists need a variety of skills. They need to be as comfortable and knowledgeable on a computer as they are on a hike, able to understand and critically analyze the samples and data they gather on a mountain peak, and just as capable of communicating their findings to an audience of non-scientists. Their tools may include a classic hammer and chisel to gather rock samples, along with sophisticated remote sensing equipment to gather a broader impression of an area. Specializations offer very different opportunities. Some analyze the probability of earthquakes and volcano eruptions and study layers of rock under building foundations to ensure a stable foundation. Others explore for and help develop oil and gas resources and clean up and reclaim land. Some geoscientists study the chemistry and movement of ocean waters and how they affect climate and weather. Most entry-level geoscientists have a bachelor's degree in a related science. Fortunately, geoscientists don't mind getting their hands dirty in a career that benefits human life on Earth.
All right, I think this video clearly demonstrated the overlap between geology and geomorphology, but at the end they also squeezed in climatology, meteorology. So again, a geoscientist, geo meaning the earth, and science, you go from geoscience to geography. That leap is not that far. But it's all about concentration within the major. But again, geospatial technology and GIS and computer cartography were demonstrated here in this video as the critical skill. All right. With a number of these professions, there are professional certifications and licensures available. So for the urban and regional planners on down the road, there is the American Institute of Certified Planners, and I would say that almost might be as important as a graduate degree, especially in Michigan. And Michigan used to have a certified planner licensure at the state level as well. I think that is no longer the case, but I might be wrong. But you become a professional in a geospatial field, be it planning or anything else. This is something that is important. And of course, you have to stay current in the field, and they make sure you stay current in the field on a biannual basis. Okay, similarly for the geospatial analyst, the cartographers and the photogrammetrist, we have the GIS Certification Institute. And again, this is about professional skills, maintaining those skills, and to be certified. And it takes a little bit. You just don't get a 4-year degree and are certified, a month after graduation. You have to be on the job for a while. There might be an entry qualification exam. They will take a look at your transcripts. They will take a look at how many years of experience. And at some point, you are eligible to take the exam and become GISP certified. In my own personal situation, I am GISP certified and I am also AICP certified, which is kind of unusual in an academic setting because I am not a practitioner, or I am no longer a practitioner in the private or public professional field. But I'm still including it in this video as a critical element to be aware of. Now, there are more certifications. There are certifications in remote sensing as well. And there are certifications in surveying. There are certifications in a number of fields. But I think that these two, if you look at the actual number, probably are the biggies. Well, here you have it. The title of the video was, Careers in Geography and Urban Regional Planning after you graduate from Grand Valley with that degree or minor or a combination of degrees. And I think, if nothing else, you can rule out this as an area of interest. You can, okay, this is all very interesting, but, not for me, which is good. On the other hand, you go, I didn't know this stuff existed. I remember Mr. Willis and Miss Johnson in junior high talking about geography. And if I am successful in reaching out to you, that, this universe actually exists, and this universe is fully capable of providing you with a meaningful living and an interesting career and a satisfying career, then I guess I have succeeded in my objective. But until I put the information in front of you, you would never know. So hopefully I succeeded, and thank you for your attention. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me, and we will help you as best as we can. And of course, anybody in the Department of Geography and Sustainable Planning at Grand Valley would do the same thing. So, okay, thank you.